everything that carries current. The first rule of high voltage line work is this: you never grab a live wire thinking you can handle it. You assess. You isolate. You ground the circuit before you touch anything. 26 years old, and I knew that rule better than I knew my own birthday. And I still reach for the one thing I should have walked away from. His name was Declan Marsh. He was an ER attending at OHSU. He had green eyes and a mouth that went flat when he was thinking hard about something. And the first time he looked at me across a trauma bay, I felt the current move through me, the same way a 13,800-volt line will move through you if you misread the situation. Fast, total, and leaving you fundamentally changed. I'm Rowan Vick. I'm 26. I climb transmission towers for Pacific Power, and I've been doing it since I was 22, which means I've spent 4 years making precise decisions in conditions that would kill most people who didn't know what they were doing. I am good at staying calm. I am good at not feeling things until the job is done. I am apparently not good at Declan Marsh. It starts with a storm. Portland in November is not the romantic version of Pacific Northwest rain that people imagine. It is 48 degrees and horizontal, and the wind off the Coast Range has been building since Tuesday, and by Thursday evening, the outage map for Multnomah County looks like someone spilled a drink on a circuit board. 14 separate fault events, 2 transmission line failures, 1 substation partial outage affecting 6,000 customers, including, inconveniently, a section of OHSU's non-critical power grid. My crew gets the hospital call at 9:47 p.m. The failed section is a riser feeding a secondary distribution panel. Not life safety circuits. Those are on independent backup, but enough of a problem that the facilities manager has called Portland General, and Portland General has called us. My foreman Bet sends me and my partner, Ximena Solis, because we're the closest crew, and because Bet trusts me with hospital work, which requires a particular kind of precision and a particular kind of patience with civilians who want to tell you how to do your job. We're on the roof of the parking structure at 10:15, running the preliminary assessment on the riser conduit in the rain, when someone opens the access door behind us. Is this going to affect the ED? I turn around. He is standing in the doorway in scrubs and a hospital fleece, no jacket, rain starting to hit his shoulders. 25, maybe 26. Dark hair plastered at the temples from the run across the roof. Green eyes, that specific mossy, rainy Pacific Northwest green that makes no sense anywhere else and total sense here. He has a jaw that belongs on someone who makes difficult decisions without flinching, and an expression that says he's currently doing exactly that. You shouldn't be up here, I say. This is an active work zone. I'm the ED attending on shift, he says. Our backup generator covers life safety, but our medication refrigeration in Bay 3 is on the circuit you're working. I need to know your timeline. 2 hours, I say. Maybe 90 minutes if the conduit damage is limited to the riser. He looks at me. Not past me at the equipment, not at Ximena, at me. Direct and undeflected, the way someone looks when they're assessing something and not pretending otherwise. 90 minutes is the difference between keeping the bay functional and relocating 6 patients, he says. I understand that, I say. 2 hours is the realistic estimate. 90 minutes is the best case. I'll get you as close to 90 as I can. He holds my gaze for 1 second longer than necessary. Okay, he says. And then, thank you. He goes back inside. The door closes. Rain hits the roof. Ximena looks at me. I look at the conduit. Don't, I say. I didn't say anything, she says. Stay right here, because what happens over the next 83 minutes is the part I keep turning over. I finish in 83 minutes. Not because the job was easier than expected. It wasn't. The conduit had secondary damage I hadn't anticipated, and I had to reroute a segment that added 20 minutes to the job, and I took it back from somewhere else. From the parts of the process where I usually build in margin. I finished in 83 minutes because I wanted to, and because I am very good at my job when I have a reason to be precise. The power comes back on in the secondary panel at 11:58 p.m. I'm breaking down the equipment when the access door opens again. He comes across the roof with 2 cups of coffee, the real kind, from somewhere inside, not the machine kind. And he hands one to Ximena and one to me without asking if we want them, which is the kind of move that either reads as presumptuous or reads as someone who has spent years in environments where you don't ask, you assess and act. 83 minutes, he says. 83 minutes, I say. He looks at me over the rim of his cup. Rain's still falling, softer now, the kind of Portland rain that's more mist than water. The roof lights are on, and the light is amber, and it's hitting him from the side, and I'm making a point of not thinking about that. Rowan Vick, I say, because my name is on my jacket, and he's going to read it anyway. Declan Marsh, he says. How'd you know I was going to ask? You look like someone who learns names, I say. Something moves in his expression. Not quite a smile. The thing that comes before a smile in someone who's careful about smiling. Get inside, he says, both of you. It's freezing. We have equipment too. It'll be there in 10 minutes, he says. Come in for 10 minutes. Ximena is already moving toward the door. I pick up my tool bag and follow. The OHSU emergency department at midnight, during a storm, is a specific kind of controlled chaos. Every bay occupied, the ambient noise of monitors and voices, and the particular institutional hum of a building doing everything it's designed to do at once. Declan navigates it the way I navigate a substation yard, purposeful, aware of every element around him, making small adjustments en route without breaking stride. He takes us to a break room that smells like old coffee and someone's microwaved lunch and is mercifully warm. He sits across from me at the small table and wraps both hands around his cup and looks at me, not in a way that requires anything, just present, like he has 10 minutes and he intends to actually use them. How long have you been doing line work? He says. 4 years, I say. You? Emergency medicine? 3 years as attending. Before that, residency. Before that, he pauses. A long time in school learning things I didn't know I'd need. Like what? He looks at his cup. How to be in a room where everything is happening and stay inside your own head. How to make a call with incomplete information and not second-guess it until after the patient is stable. He looks up. You probably know something about that. The incomplete information part, I say. You're always working with incomplete information. You make your best read of what the circuit is doing and you act on it. And if the read is wrong, then you deal with what happens. But you don't freeze. Freezing is worse than a wrong read. He's looking at me with an expression I don't have a name for yet. Like I've said something that matched something he already knew, and the matching is the interesting part. Yeah, he says quietly. Exactly that. Ximena's phone buzzes. She looks at it and makes a face at me that I carefully don't acknowledge. Next call, she says. Rowan, you want me to get the equipment? I'll get it, I say. 2 minutes. She leaves. The break room is suddenly smaller. Declan is still looking at me. He hasn't moved. You should go, he says. I know, I say. Neither of us moves for 4 seconds. I work Thursdays, he says, and every other weekend, nights mostly. I look at him. The fluorescent light is doing nothing flattering to either of us, and I am completely unable to look away from his face. I don't know why you're telling me that, I say. I don't either, he says. But I'm telling you. I stand up. I pick up my tool bag. I am 26 years old, and I have walked off live jobs in worse weather than this, and I have never once felt like I was leaving something behind on a roof. Good night, Dr. Marsh, I say. Good night, Rowan, he says. He says my first name like he's been using it for years. Here's where it gets complicated. Don't look away. I don't go back to OHSU. I think about going back to OHSU, which is different and also somehow worse, because thinking about it means I'm aware of not doing it, which means it's a choice I'm making consciously and repeatedly, rather than just an absence. I work. I climb towers in the rain. I splice 336 MCM aluminum conductor on a span above the Willamette, in conditions that require my complete attention, and I give my complete attention, and it works fine. And then I'm in my truck, driving back to the yard, and I'm thinking about green eyes, and the specific way someone can say your name like it's already familiar. Zemena doesn't bring it up. This is what I appreciate most about Zemena. She is constitutionally incapable of letting things go, but she has the precision to know exactly when to apply that quality. And for 2 weeks she says nothing, and then on a Wednesday she says, "You're bad at this." At what? At the thing where you decide not to want something, and then want it anyway. I look at the road. "You went back and checked his schedule," she says. I did not. The hospital has a public-facing physician directory. I say nothing. "Rowan." "It's complicated." I say. "It's not complicated," she says. "You're making it complicated because that's how you've decided to handle it, which is fine. But know what you're doing." I know what I'm doing. I'm doing the thing where I assess the risk and determine it's outside my operating parameters and I don't reach for it. I've done this before with other things. It works. You get clear on the risk and you maintain your distance, and eventually the current dissipates. Except the current is not dissipating. I see him again on a Saturday. Not at the hospital. At a coffee place on Division Street that I have been going to since I moved to Portland 3 years ago, before I knew he existed, before any of this. He is at the counter when I walk in civilian clothes, dark Henley jacket, looking like himself without the context of the hospital around him, which is somehow more disorienting than any version of him I've seen before. He sees me at the same moment I see him. For a second, neither of us does anything. Then he says, "Of all the coffee shops." "I've been coming here for 3 years, I say. "So have I," he says. We look at each other. The barista is waiting. I order. He moves to the end of the counter, and I move with him, because the alternative is to stand on the other side of the room, and we have already passed the point where that reads as anything except deliberate avoidance. "You didn't come back," he says. Not as an accusation, as a statement of something he already knew. "No," I say. "Okay," he says. "It's not—" I stop. "You don't have to explain," he says. He looks at me. That direct, undeflected look, the one that has the same quality as the hospital roof. Assessing, present, not flinching. But I'd like to hear it if you want to say it. I look at my hands on the counter. Lineman's hands, calloused, a small scar on my right palm from a cable clamp that slipped 3 years ago. The particular roughness of someone who works with metal and rope and does not spend a lot of time worrying about how his hands look. "I know what I feel," I say quietly. I haven't decided what to do about it." He's quiet for a moment. "That's honest," he says. I try to be. "So do I." He picks up his coffee. "I'll be here next Saturday, same time. If you want to—" He pauses. "Talk, or not talk, either one." He goes to a table by the window. I take my coffee to a different table. For 40 minutes we're in the same room, and we don't speak, and it is the most present I have felt in 2 weeks. This is the part where I stopped running, and I want you to understand what that actually looked like. I show up the next Saturday, and the Saturday after that. We don't make plans. We don't acknowledge that we're both showing up. We just do, and we sit at adjacent tables, and eventually at the same table, and we talk. About work. About Portland in winter, which Declan has opinions about that are specific and considered and occasionally wrong in ways I enjoy telling him. About the particular loneliness of shift work and how you can be surrounded by people all day, patients, colleagues, the entire churning population of an emergency department, and still come home to an apartment and feel the silence as something physical. "Like the volume got turned off," he says. "Yeah," I say. "Exactly." He looks at me across the table. We're 3 weeks into Saturdays, and the distance between us at the table has been shortening the same way the light changes in Portland in November. Incrementally, continuously, in a direction that only makes sense when you look back at where you started. "Rowan," he says. "I know," I say. "Do you?" I look at him. He's leaning slightly forward, elbows on the table, coffee between his hands. The window light is on his face, gray Portland winter light, diffused and honest, the kind that shows you everything. And he's looking at me with an expression that has stopped performing patience and is just being it. I know, I say again. I need it to be a decision, not something that happens to me. He considers this. Okay, he says. That's it, okay? You're telling me what you need, he says. I'm not going to argue with that. I look at him. Something in my chest does the thing it's been doing since a hospital roof in the rain. This particular pressure, like a circuit that's been running at capacity and needs somewhere to go. Why are you so? I start. What? Patient, I say. You've been waiting. I've been making you wait and you've been. I'm not waiting for something to happen to me either, he says quietly. I made my decision 3 weeks ago on a parking structure roof. He pauses. I'm giving you room to make yours. I look at the table, the window, the Division Street traffic moving in the rain outside. Declan, I say. Yeah. I made my decision 3 weeks ago too, I say. I just didn't know how to say it yet. He looks at me. Something in his face changes. Not relief, something quieter than relief. Like something that's been held very still is allowed to move. He reaches across the table. His hand covers mine. Warm, certain, with the same quality as everything else about him. Deliberate, fully present, not performing anything. I look at his hand on mine. I turn my hand over. His fingers close around mine and stay there. Outside, Portland does what Portland does in November. It rains. The light goes silver. The city moves around us in its gray and green Pacific Northwest way, completely indifferent to the two of us at a table by the window. Neither of us says anything for a long time. There's nothing that needs saying. 4 weeks after the coffee shop, it's a Saturday again. It's always a Saturday now, which means Saturday has become a different kind of day, a day that has weight to it by the time Thursday arrives. And we are not at the coffee shop. We are at Declan's apartment on the south side of Portland, close enough to OHSU that he can get there in 12 minutes when they call him in early. The apartment has bookshelves on every available wall, and a window that looks north toward the West Hills, and a kitchen that smells like the coffee he made an hour ago. We've been here for 3 hours. We've eaten. We've talked about things that don't matter and things that do. And now it's late afternoon, and the winter light is going the specific way it goes in Portland at 4 o'clock in December, turning amber at the edges, the last of it warm before the dark. And we're standing at the window watching the hills go gold, and I am aware, with the complete specificity of a person who has spent 4 years making precise assessments in high-stakes situations, of exactly where I am and exactly how close he is. He's standing beside me. Close enough that our arms are touching, shoulder to wrist, and neither of us has moved away from that contact since it started 10 minutes ago when we shifted to look at something on the street below and ended up here, side by side, in the last of the afternoon light. Rowan, he says. Yeah. He turns, and I turn, and we are facing each other in the amber light with the window behind him and the hills going dark beyond the glass, and he is looking at me with that look, the one from the hospital roof, the one from the coffee shop, the one I have been cataloging for weeks because I didn't know what else to do with it, except now it's different. Now the look has stopped waiting. I reach up, slowly, my hand at his jaw, my thumb at the corner of his mouth, feeling the slight tension there. The tension of someone holding still because they've decided to let someone else move. He closes his eyes for 1 second. Just one. Then he opens them and looks at me, and his hands find my waist and he pulls me in. Not rushed, not urgent, just the clean and certain movement of someone who has made a decision and is honoring it, and his forehead comes to rest against mine. We stay like that. His forehead on my forehead. Our breath, warm between us. His hands at my waist and my hand at his jaw, and outside the window Portland going dark in its gradual, unhurried way. I kept not coming back, I say quietly. I'm sorry. You're here now, he says. I'm here now, I say. He tilts his head just slightly, his nose beside mine. The amber light going, the room going warm and dim, and everything that's been running at capacity in my chest for 6 weeks, finally cleanly, finding somewhere to go. I knew, he says, From the roof. I wasn't going to push it. I know, I say. That's why I'm here. He smiles against my cheek. The real version. The one that starts small and becomes something you feel more than see. The one I've been watching for since the first time I saw the thing that comes before it. You're extremely stubborn, he says. I'm precise, I say. There's a difference. He laughs. Sudden, low, close to my ear. And I feel it more than hear it, and I think, there. That's the whole circuit. Complete. Here's what I've learned about current. A live wire doesn't announce itself. It doesn't say, I will change you, I will move through you, I will leave you fundamentally different than you were before you touched me. And you can spend your whole career learning to read the signs and still walk up to the one thing you weren't expecting and stand there while the current runs. But here's what they don't put in the safety manual. Sometimes the current is not the danger. Sometimes the current is the point. Sometimes you've been standing in the dark, perfectly insulated, perfectly protected, and it's only when something finally gets through that you understand what all those safety protocols were guarding against is also the only thing that makes the whole system worth running. I'm 26 years old. I climb towers in the rain. I make precise decisions in conditions that would kill someone who didn't know what they were doing. I am good at staying calm. Declan Marsh got through anyway. I think I let him. Here is what someone passing the window of a second-floor apartment on the south side of Portland at 4:47 p.m. on a Saturday in December would have seen. Two young men at the window, the taller one with his hand at the other's face, the other with his hands at the taller one's waist, their foreheads together, both of them still, both of them in the amber light that was the last of the afternoon. The window lit from inside, the street dark below, the West Hills going dark behind the glass. And in the room, two people who both knew, who both spent time not saying it, who are both done not saying it. Current, finally, completing its circuit, the whole system running.